think Cubs should let Counsell out of his cage. I don't know if it's too late for that, maybe, but next year definitely they should.
Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers at The Athletic. With us today, Patrick is the legend himself from the Chicago Tribune. He's been around much longer than we have. Paul Sullivan, who's covered both teams in town, is joining us today. Patrick, take it away.
Well, I have a very pressing question, Sully. I saw this clip on Marquee in which Taylor McGregor was talking to Craig Counsell, and Counsell credited the recent hot stretch to a Taylor Swift candle that clubhouse manager extraordinaire Danny Miller had given him. I assumed it was the Sully Bounce of just you showing up in Miami. What do you got on Taylor Swift candles and the Cubs, not playing dead, as you wrote in the Tribune?
I'm not sure what to think anymore, honestly, because I pretty much pronounced them dead last month, and they're still in the same hundred. I don't understand the candle thing. Does it smell like Taylor Swift? Is that the deal?
I think that's how it markets itself. I'm not an expert on candleware or Taylor Swift, but it seemed like one of the things that happen when the team starts playing a little better.
It sounds like a Joe Madden thing to me. Like that would be Joe Madden would do for sure. It really doesn't connect with Counsell in my mind, because he's not a more interesting guy, but he's pretty low key as far as that kind of stuff. You don't really think of him as superstitious, but if Danny's involved, I'm all for it. Danny's the true legend here.
Yes.
I noticed it in the Pittsburgh series. I was going to ask about it, and then I was like, I'm not derailing this post-game presser with a question about why this candle is sitting here. I'm glad Taylor eventually got to it. But you touched on something there, Sully, and I'm curious. You've covered so many managers in this town. We're almost a full year into Craig Counsell. Like, what are your takeaways, and how, like, does he stand out in any way to you, or is it right now like he's so laid back at times that I feel like maybe we fully haven't gotten to know him yet? Maybe the full person, maybe this just is the personality. I'm curious your takeaways from 5 months, I guess, plus spring training of Craig Counsell.
Well, I knew him a little bit in Milwaukee, just through going over to the Brewers clubhouse and doing, pregame interviews and stuff, and trying to start some, controversies with the roof, stuff like that, which we talked about in Miami quite a bit. Just off the record, I can't divulge any of what he said, but he did explain the whole Roofgate episode, which in hindsight, I wish I had known better. I would have really played it a lot differently. But anyways, he's, as you said, he's low key. He says basically the same things. He's got his 3 lines that he likes to throw at us about pitchers just being out-getters and baseball is hard, and I can't remember the other one, but it's take it one day at a time, basically, kind of manager. He's not the most quotable guy. He's a good guy. I really like him. The one thing I guess that surprises me more than anything, just because of watching him in Milwaukee with so many different players, is that he basically sticks with the same lineups all the time. We so much criticism last year for sticking with Dansby down the stretch and wearing him out, maybe a couple other guys, and Counsell basically doing the same thing. You hardly ever see any changes in the lineup, and it's already September. I would have thought for sure he would tinker Crow Armstrong moving up. At this point, he's been hitting for over a month now. but he doesn't want to do that. So I guess that would be my only real take, is that he's very old school and that he writes the lineup and that's his line. It's really not going to change much.
And you kind of alluded to it, Sully. Like, you were great about just going over to Counsell whenever there was, someone got sunburned on a rain out at Wrigley, or roof gates, things like that. Do you feel like Counsell appreciated that more when he was not working for the Cubs? Or do you feel like, I would actually argue that, or state that, I think he's pretty sarcastic and has a good sense of humor and just kind of does roll with things, even though that's really hard to tell if you only watch the post-game press conferences from home on TV.
Yeah, I think that the Cubs have actually not helped him with the way they do things, with the sitting behind a podium in front of a wind trust sign so that they could get advertising for marquee or whatever. He is way better just sitting in the dugout, rapping freestyle. They've kind of caged him. And, I understand he probably knew that coming in. That's part of the Cubs gig is, it's TV show more than it's anything else. And because when we were in Miami last weekend, after we were done with the interviews, we, me and Maddie and Taylor, sat and talked with him for, about 20 minutes, just about odds and ends, nothing to do, nothing on the record, just, talking. And I don't ever see him doing that in Chicago, because he leaves that podium and then he's back in his office, and then we don't see him till the post game. So I think Cubs should let Counsell out of his cage. I don't know if it's too late for that, maybe, but next year definitely they should rethink that.
He absolutely is better on the road, I think, and they occasionally let him go in the dugout at home, and I do like that. He likes to talk baseball. I think that's clear. Like he enjoys it. He enjoys the back and forth. We spent like 5 minutes the other day, like thinking about where free agents may land and which players should go where and what teams have what needs. He's interested in that stuff. Eventually he'll be like, all right, I got to go work or whatever. He's like, you guys figure this stuff out on your own. But he enjoys it. I think like there haven't been. I mean, Ross was good about that. He'd stick around and chat, and Ozzie Guillen was the king of it, right? Like there probably wasn't anyone better than Ozzie Guillen. And oddly enough, that was probably my first presser, was sitting in the dugout with Ozzie Guillen, and I was thinking, like, is this how it always is? This is going to be my life for if I succeed and can do this job. But obviously it wasn't. It changed quickly.
Weird, because managing, you should be a people person, and there's no more of a people person than Ozzie, and Counsell seems that way too. Rossi definitely was that way.
Yeah.
So, and then on the flip side, I would go to these Pedro Grifol press conferences, and they would just be so serious and draining, and then he would get up and leave. And I mean, I'm sure losing had part to do with it, but Grady Sizemore, he doesn't stick around and talk either. So maybe it's just a White Sox thing. But I would encourage all managers to get to know their writers. We talked to Bruce Bochy like a half hour yesterday after the pregame with the Sox Rangers, and he couldn't have been more engaging. So I don't know, maybe we're just old school that way.
So you were such a great dude when I first started in 2010, and Sahadev was shortly behind me, and you were always just like generous with your time, and like you were for someone who is old school, you're very welcoming and like current with like new ideas and just being fresh all the time. And I was curious, in my window here, I would say this is the most boring Cubs team I've covered. Is this the most boring Cubs team of your lifetime?
Oh, geez. I'd have to really think about that.
Or of your career, however you want to frame it.
Yeah, I would, On the field, yes, definitely. I don't remember a Cubs team that until the last week couldn't hit, and now they're hitting like crazy for some reason. Maybe it's, the teams they're facing, but yeah, just a very boring team to watch. And not a whole lot of characters in the clubhouse. Nice guys, a lot of nice guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Nobody really that would, stick around and, just talk, even like a Rizzo or a Kyle Schwarber or, those guys, even Lester, even though he was kind of a grouchy guy sometimes, he was a great quote. And so I don't think they have much of that there. So that I think that plays into it. And I don't know what they can do. I mean, probably their most their biggest character is Shota, and he doesn't speak English, so we don't get to really get the full rewards of that. So yeah, kind of a boring year. Now they're playing well. Maybe it's too late. I don't know, but it's at least it's fun to see in the last week or so.
I love a great deal, but I'm not going to run sprints in the outfield just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. With Mint Mobile, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan. Purchase and activation is super easy too.
To get started, go to mintmobile.com/territory. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number.
To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/territory. That's mintmobile.com/territory. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/territory.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on their first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Sully, PCA has a chance to be that character, I think. And what's funny is Bethancourt certainly is a character, but he's just was picked up off the DFA, and like it's not like he's going to be here for years, but he does seem to have a personality, and he says some things that I wouldn't expect a player to say, with cameras on them and a mic in front of them. But I kind of appreciate it. So have you seen, we keep touching on this, this team is trying to make a run. And I keep thinking, like, it happens in baseball. It does. Like the unexpected, where a team is 5 games out at the end of August and somehow or more. I don't remember it happening in Chicago, like with the Cubs or the White Sox. And I think that's a big reason. Like we have, like, fans, especially because they focus so much just on their team. Fans struggle to like wrap their mind around something like this happening. It's very unlikely. I get that, but also like, am I missing a season where this happened in Chicago, where a team seemed like they were dead even in August? Like, yeah, like second halves they've gotten hot, right? But not this late in the season.
No, it's usually the flip where they're, kicking butt for like the first half, and then they just completely fall apart. I don't know, what was that year with 17 or 18 when they
18 and 19, right?
Brewers caught up with them, and then they blew the wild card, or not wild card, the extra game, whatever they called it, game 163. And then the next year they had the poom poom.
I knew you were going to say it. I love it.
Poom poom. As Joe Madden called it, 2 shots at jaw that Craig Kimbrell gave up the home runs to. I think it was DeYoung, and I can't remember the other one.
Was it Yachty?
Yeah, it might have been Yachty. That was a crushing game at the end of that collapse. So I've seen way more collapses in my Cubs life. I don't recall any like coming up big down the stretch. I guess last year was the closest because they were left for dead in July or June, and then they came back and actually had the lead in the wild card before blowing it. So this is
that goes down as another collapse, right?
Yeah, that was a collapse. Not as great a collapse. It didn't feel like an epic collapse because they did come back from 10 games down or something, and then looked good. So, I mean, what were they? They had to be 9 or 10 games down in July this year. So it is a great comeback. But, like you said, it's, there's like 25, 27 games left, and doesn't doesn't bode well unless both the Mets and the Braves collapse as well.
Hearing collapse, Cubs, Mets, remind me of something I wanted to ask you, Sully. Like what sort of influence was working for Mike Royko early in your career, and like how did that kind of, even to this day, like inform your coverage? Because you do such a great job of like weaving the neighborhood and history into your stories, and also just like you have your network of spies kind of out there on the north side. There's always like a detail or two that you have. Just what was kind of the Royko impact on the columnist you've become?
Well, I guess the number one thing was, don't take any shit from anyone. I don't know if you could say that on your podcast, but he was always like, you were representing me, not the Tribune, which of course I was paid by the Tribune, but I was his leg man. And if they're messing with you, then technically they're messing with me, and I'm not going to take any of that. Like, so don't take any no comments, call them back, that kind of stuff. So you really couldn't take no for an answer. So that was really instilled in me early. And also just the attention to detail, because, Royko was such a great writer, and, so beyond anything I've ever seen in Chicago. But, he observed things so greatly that, you don't just talk to the PR people or the person that you're writing about. You talk to a million people, and some things you're not going to use, some things you are, some things are on the record, some things are off. But I kind of took that with me when I started covering the Cubs in the late 90s, that it's not just the team I'm covering. It's like Yosh Kawano, Ronnie Wu, the Yum Yum Donut Place, Murphy's, Beth Murphy. It's not just the team you're covering. You're covering the whole culture of the Cubs. And that's why I kind of like to poke fun at some of the Cubs executives who were not used to being talked about that way, like a Carl Rice or even a Crane Kenny, because they're part of the story too. And they're, if they put themselves in the spotlight, which they often did with their press conferences, they should be subject to criticism as well. So I've always thought that, it's a different beat, the Cubs. It's just a different beat than anything else. And with the White Sox, I don't really cover it in the same kind of way. There's nothing around White Sox Park to talk to. There's no McCuddy's. I guess the closest I do cover the Sodfather quite a bit because, he's a legend. But no, I always thought of the Cubs as something different and unique. And I like the give and take with people like, Beth Murphy and Ronnie Wu and the Rooftop guys, and even Crane. I give Crane some credit because he has taken a lot of abuse from me, and he's, I think he's come to understand that it's just part of the gig now.
Sully, when you talk about the gig, I feel it has completely changed, obviously, in so many ways. One way that I've just never seen is like the cutthroat competition between the papers or other beats. Like we're friendlier now. We just are. What was that like to work under those conditions where it felt like not only were you competitors, which I look at it as competitors, but I'm also like friendly with these people. I don't think that was the case back when you were starting.
No, not at all. When it was, I always go back to 2004, 20 years ago with the Sun-Times and the Tribune rivalry. There was no Athletic then. You had the Herald, but it was a suburban paper only, so you couldn't get it in the city. You had the Southtown, which was a smaller paper, and they covered the beat well, but we weren't worried about what they had because no one was reading it outside of the South Side. So it was basically us against the Sun-Times, and the Sun-Times had a guy, Mike Kiley, who was a really old school, great beat writer, had his sources, was very tight with management, which I was not, and used it against me and did a whole lot of the Sun-Times has learned this, the Sun-Times has learned that. And, we got into a lot of fights that season because the Steve Stone versus the Cubs players and Dusty Baker thing got to be a huge story in the middle of the summer, and I was writing it all the time, and the Sun-Times was denying it all the time, like, oh, this is just, I think they called it Tribune Fantasy Land and stuff like that. And they had their players on their side, like Mark Pryor and Sammy Sosa, and they had the upper management. And I really didn't. I felt like I was fighting every other beat writer at that point. But I still was friendly with most of them. It was just, and even Kiley, we could go out and have a beer afterwards, but it was pretty nasty. And I can't say that I missed those days, but having gone through it, I think it makes you a better reporter, and it certainly makes you more thick-skinned because, man, I took a lot of shit, back then. Including from the Cubs management, Andy McPhail, calling me into his office and, calling my boss in, telling them, how can you let this guy cover our team? He hates the Cubs, and, stuff like that. It just seemed to happen a lot.
One of the preconditions of you coming on was you had asked, can I rip AJ? And obviously AJ Pierzynski and Ken Rosenthal are two big figures at the Foul Network, and kind of what you're talking about reminds me of those guys. I don't know if it's a love-hate relationship you have with those guys. Maybe it's more of a Joe Madden, like you vibrate on their frequency, that like you love the give and take,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people really respond to that because you just walk up there, you have your question, you have your recorder, like there's not a lot of gray area. Just how did you develop that style, and how do you why do you enjoy the give and take? How do you kind of go about it on a day-to-day basis? Because it's fun for us to watch. I've learned a ton just by observing how you do your job.
I'm just guessing. I mean, I never really, I'm not in, thinking about it when I do it. But I am sure it's a Royko influence because he was very direct and to the point, even when he was telling me, I could get someone off the street that could do this job better than you. And, it was quite an experience working for him. And I don't know, I guess I think of one incident when the Cubs were getting ready to fire Dale Swaim, and the rumor was they were going to hire Joe Girardi, and I think I just outright asked Theo, on the field.
Yes.
And I don't even know how I phrased it, but it was very blunt, and he said it was a borderline disrespectful of me to do that, which I was like, you're the president of the team, you're not president of America. I don't, I guess it's not a lack of respect for these people. It's just that, you're just someone I'm interviewing. You're not God or anything. And sometimes I think that they're so used to, being handled with kid glove by reporters who don't want to, get them mad at them and possibly lose access to them, that they kind of take me in a different way. And so, I mean, Rick Hahn hardly ever talked to me. He was very nice to me, but he would not do interviews with me. And I always found that challenging. And just yesterday, I go up to Chris Getz, the White Sox general manager, and he looked like, oh, geez, here we go. And I go, hey, you got a second? And he was fine. And we talked for, 10 minutes and talked a little off the record. And, I never would have gotten that kind of reception before from the White Sox. So I always appreciate when people understand that my job is to, ask you questions. Some of them are going to be uncomfortable. Some of them are going to be softballs, but, you don't have to answer them if you don't want, but at least, show the respect for for my job to, at least pretend that you're going to answer them. You don't have to give me the greatest quotes, but just answer some questions, I guess.
Sully, that's definitely something I've learned from watching you and other reporters sometimes there are times you can massage the question because you're searching for a way to because it's been asked so many times and nobody's getting the answer that they want. But sometimes the best way is just to be straightforward. Just ask the question. Being uncomfortable is part of this. They're not going to love it every single time. So I've appreciated that, watching veterans like you do that. I guess when I call you a veteran, I'm a veteran, and Patrick is a veteran now too, which feels odd to say, but that's to the reality of where we are. And
getting old.
Yeah.
Hey, I do want to say something about AJ and Kenny because
the floor is yours. Yeah,
go for it.
I have all the respect in the world for both those guys, and Kenny is like my hero. I've always used to take pictures of him and tweet it, and just to get on his nerves, because we came up at the same time when he was with the Baltimore Sun, and I'm sure I've gotten on his nerves to no end. But I have so much respect for him, and just the fact that he was the only one national writer that would stand up to Rob Manfred a lot of the times, and it cost him his job at MLB Network. It's just a lot of respect for him. And AJ, even though he was with the White Sox, he always considered me a enemy because I covered the Cubs. But I always appreciated his honesty and his bluntness as a player, just interviewing him. And I think he'd be a great manager for the White Sox. I don't think it'll ever happen, but he's kind of like Ozzy. He turned to the podcast world and he's kicking butt. And I always like to see players go to the media and become part of us. And it's kind of like, okay, you're one of us now, and they don't want to admit it, but they are.
Kenny's one of the best teammates I've had in this business, and AJ, like you said, honesty is so appreciated, especially from former players. Don't play games, just come straight at it, and I think that's why he succeeds at what he does. Sully, thanks so much for joining us. This is North Side Territory. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe, do all that fun stuff for the podcast. Subscribe to The Athletic, subscribe to the Chicago Tribune, where you can read all of Paul Sullivan's work. He is a legend in the industry and in Chicago. Thanks so much, Sully. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, guys.